1 more minute. Yeah. Hope you all had a chance to discuss with your tables your level of knowledge about entering the EU market, as well as where do you consider yourself and maybe your product when it comes to placing a system or a model on the market. So, quick round of hands. I'm going to say beginner, intermediate, advanced. Who has like a beginner to no knowledge of the EU AI Act? And that's okay if you don't. Yes, that's good. Okay, well, it's good and bad. Medium level knowledge of the EU Act, awesome. And advanced level of knowledge. Oh, we got to start over there. Yeah, okay, yeah. All questions go over to that gentleman at the end. No kidding. So, last question before we start. Who is in a position or an organization where they believe they will be involved in the placement of an AI system or model on the European market? Okay, very cool, very cool. So even if you are not intending to place such a system on the EU market, it will become very relevant when you consider other international jurisdictions because there are a lot of lessons pulled from the EU that you can hopefully apply to other jurisdictions. So let's start with the presentation. For those of you who have no idea what BSI is, I'm going to give you a quick primer. We are the British Standards Institution. We were founded in 1901. We were the world's first standards body. And for those of you who are not familiar with the word standard, though there was a session yesterday from SEC about what standard is. A standard is a document that represents a way of doing something that is considered best practice. So a standard is put together by subject matter experts, let's say from around the world. If you need a little more explanation, think of it like a document, like a how-to guide, let's say to build a cake. You get your subject matter experts. Maybe you get a Martha Stewart, Ina Gardner, or a Gordon Ramsay, though I'm not sure he makes cakes. But they all come together. They work to make a standard on how to build or bake the best vanilla cake. Now, you can do whatever you want with that cake. You can sell it, you can donate it, you can eat it. But if you follow that best practice guidance document, you are following a standard. So, as of this year, BSI, we administer and work on technical bodies for about 3,100 new or updated standards a year. And again, these can range from things like AI lifecycle development all the way to how to maintain the hygiene of a bread slicer. All kinds of interesting things. So, in addition to being a standards administrator, we are a conformity assessment body for CE marking and other schemes. So, if you look at your glasses or any other product you have with the CE mark, that means it has met the requirements to be self-declared or has been reviewed by a conformity assessment body to be placed on the EU market. So that's a little bit about BSI, and we'll talk about how we're involved more with the EU AI Act and what resources you can take advantage of for any organization of any size, any budget, to help you prepare for the EU AI Act. So I'm going to go over a few topics, and here's the agenda, as well as Andrea will help describe them and explain a few of them. You probably cannot see the screen, but first I'm going to talk about the EU AI Act. Why are we even bothering with legislation? The second thing is, who does the EU Act apply to? Does it apply to you? Does it apply to your neighbor? We'll find out. There are some timelines with the EU AI Act. It is a piece of European legislation, so there will be some important dates for some of you to take note of. Then we get into more complex things, such as going into the different types of AI systems and models. There's a classification scheme, which I will briefly go over. Unfortunately, it's a little complicated, but I'll try to walk you through how we can classify different AI systems. Again, the AI Act is a little complex, so don't worry if you don't get it the first time. These slides will be available after the presentation, as well as on BSI's website. We have a lot of resources, white papers for you to learn how to classify an AI system. Again, it's not entirely straightforward. I'll then just talk about who is enforcing the rules and the stipulations in the EU AI Act, and if there's an organization that's not compliant, what are the fees that will be presented and levied. Then my coworker Andrea will talk about the different obligations of what we're going to be considered high-risk AI systems, because there are going to be 3 different types of AI, or four or five different types of AI systems and models. We're going to specifically focus on high risk, because that's all the time we have today. He'll talk about what is considered state of the art and how you can use harmonized standards or standards in general to quickly and efficiently fulfill certain stipulations of the Act. Then he's going to briefly go over some of the articles and some corresponding standards that will help you to prepare for entry into force. Then he'll lastly discuss about BSI and our product offerings and how you can take advantage of them. And then we'll end with a Q&A. Sound good? Okay. So what is the EU AI Act? So as we all know, there's been a debate about whether or not AI systems should be regulated or not. And to someone who comes from a regulated industry such as medical devices, I sometimes roll my eyes because AI systems, big or small, do have consequences to people's health, safety, well-being, and fundamental rights. So the EU was the first international national body to put a proposal together for legislation. To have that be implemented into force, China was the first one to get the official legislation out. But the EU was the one who the Commission put the first proposal together. So this EU AI Act aims to do a few things. It aims to identify the players in the landscape, the different types of AI systems we have, and the different obligations that are required from these different players. And this is all intended to be harmonized across the member states within the EU. However, member states are also subject to bring up their own laws if there are things that they disagree with. The cool thing about this is, well, I think it's cool. The cool thing about the EU AI Act is that it's a horizontal legislation. So no matter what domain or industry you work in, maybe it's pharmaceuticals, machineries, even toys, the EU AI Act will apply to any industry or domain. So if you're in a heavily regulated industry, let's say aerospace, you will have to comply to the aerospace laws, directives, regulations, but you will also have to consider the EU AI Act when you're doing your development processes or considering placing a product on the EU market. So we have quite a few cast of players. The EU AI Act, I have a little blurb here about how it's applicable to providers and deployers, but we also have some other economic operators which I want to introduce you to. So I want you to do an exercise to yourself. Think about your organization and what it does on a daily basis. I'm going to go over 4 different categories of roles and try to think, where do you fit in, or do you even fit in? So the first one is an AI provider. So this can be a provider who is within the EU or outside of the EU who develops their own AI system or model and then places it on the EU market. That's the first one. The second one is you can be an importer or distributor or authorized representative for an AI system or model. This is pretty explanatory for importers and distributors. If you think of physical products, we have our importers, distributors. But for those who are not familiar with authorized rep, if you're an AI provider in, let's say, the US, and you do not have a presence in the EU, you will need to employ an official representative to represent you physically within the EU. So that's an authorized rep, and it's a common practice to use authorized rep in other types of regulated industries. Now, here we get into like a weird kind of entity, and that's deployers, and it requires a little more thinking. So deployers are those who take an AI system, whether it's off the shelf provided by AI providers and integrate them into a professional business capacity. So there are a few examples of these. Let's say you're making a toy and you want to integrate AI into it. So you go to, this is highly theoretical, Microsoft, and ask for a ChatGPT to be integrated in your toy. And then you put your toy on the market. You are considered a deployer or a product manufacturer. Product manufacturer is under deployer. However, you might think, okay, we integrated ChatGPT into our product. However, you might have some internal guys also adding features to the ChatGPT interface. You would be then considered a provider. One other example of a deployer is someone who uses it, I guess, with any intention to transfigure or change the AI system. I'll give you an example. Maybe many of the hospitals you go to, they have an AI system. Maybe you're doing some imaging and they use an AI system to help improve the accuracy. They are considered a deployer. They are using the AI system in a professional capacity, so they would fall under this third bucket. Lastly, we have an interesting category, which are providers who are located in a third country outside of the EU, but the output of that AI system is used in any capacity within the EU. So I'll give you like 2 examples. Let's say we have some AI diagnostic medical app that's used in Australia. So it collects data in Australia and it makes recommendations. If any of that output data is used in the EU, you will have to follow certain obligations or requirements, and you will fall under the EU AI Act. So I hope you had a good think about where you fall. Can we spend like 1 to 2 minutes to talk about where do you think your organization falls within these 4 buckets? Or you might have to wait till the next slide to see if you're one of the regulatory cast members. So 2 to 5 minutes. Yep, at your tables. Let's see if we can just wrap that up. Maybe you had a good discussion where you were challenged about what bucket you might fall under. So I'm going to introduce you to the regulatory cast, like who is managing the monitoring and governance of the EU AI Act. So I'm going to introduce you to a few terms some of you may be familiar with. The first one is notified bodies. So when I go out to meet people and I say BSI is a notified body, people usually don't know what that means. So a notified body is a conformity assessment body that performs an assessment against the applicable legislation. For example, for the EU AI Act, for high-risk systems that are intended to be placed on the EU market, they must go through an assessment through a notified body who is designated to the EU AI Act in order to receive CE marking. Remember that CE mark I was saying to take a look at your sunglasses and phones? They have to go through a notified body for that assessment to attain that CE marking or get a rejection. So you can think of it very similar to your agencies here like Health Canada, FDA. A notified body acts in that capacity. So who monitors the notified bodies? It's our national competent authorities, and they are the member state representatives who assess the notified bodies to determine if we are even competent to assess you guys. And they also monitor existing AI systems which are approved and on the market, as well as they may inquire if they notice something that's wrong with a particular system that's already on the market. We have two new terms in the EU AI Act, or two new entities. We have the European Artificial Intelligence Board, which is essentially the bridge between the member states, the national competent authorities, and the public. Then we have the European AI Office, which sits within the European Commission. And it's a board of scientific experts that monitor all the available general purpose AI systems on the market. Don't worry if you don't know what general purpose AI is, I'll be going into that. So they are the ones who keep the registry of all the general purpose AI. So actually, I'm kind of curious, do we have anyone from the anyone who would fit in the regulatory cast here, potentially? That's all right, okay. So here are some important dates for you to know or to mention at your dinner table and to show off how much you know about the EU AI Act. So the first one is, when was this proposal even drafted? It was drafted back in April 2021. Then it went from the Commission to the Parliament to the Council of the EU. It did undergo negotiations, and there's still things that are unaligned, but ultimately the Council voted to pass it under law in February of 2024. Parliament also voted, and now to make it officially into law, the updated version as edited by the lawyers should be published in the official journal of the European Union. Once a piece of legislation is published in the journal, it has 20 days before it takes effect. And that 20-day period is for member states to either make suggestions or, I guess, deny certain provisions. But after that 20 days, we are predicting that the EU AI Act comes into force June 2024. Then within that document, there is a stipulation that come June 2026, 2 years after, the entire law will have to come into effect. And there are some but other dates you need to be aware of that are outside of this timeline, which I'm going to go over, depending on what economic operator you are and what type of AI system or model you have. Okay, so that brings me to the next point. So you determine you're an economic operator. You have an AI system or model. How do you use the AI Act's classification system to determine which of these levels you fall under? I will say that this pyramid does not consider general purpose AI. I'll be getting to that a little later. So think about the AI system or model you have and its intended use. The way things are classified in the EU is based on its application, intended use, and risk, not the underlying technology. That's not the case for general purpose AI. So, as you can see, there are 4 levels we have here. The first level we have, and I apologize, this is quite small and hard to read, is unacceptable. So unacceptable cases or prohibited AI systems on the European market are listed in Article 5 of the European AI Act. And they're quite direct on what they consider as a prohibited use. So if you have a product and you're curious if it's prohibited, which I hope it's not, you'll have to go through this list in Article 5. But I will give you some examples. If you have an AI system that monitors someone's behavior and then provides a social score on how they should be treated, or a group of persons in a negative way or present some harm, that is a prohibited system. In addition, which is quite interesting, if you have real-time biometric monitoring in a publicly accessible place. That is prohibited. There are some, I guess, exceptions to that rule, but if we're all walking around here, if there's a camera here and just scanning all of us real time, hey, that's Sarah, that's Andrea, that's Georgia, that is prohibited, real time in a publicly accessible place. There are cases where it's allowed under a warrant with law enforcement approval. There are particular exceptions, but that's just one example. The previous was just one example of a prohibited system. So again, you can find this list in Article 5 of the EU AI Act. So don't place these on the European market. Okay, high-risk systems. I kind of laugh because the way to determine if your AI system is high risk is not simple. But I'm going to walk you through it here, and if you want to go over the slides afterwards, you're more than welcome to do so. So there are two ways to determine if your AI system is high risk. The first thing is to go to Article 6, and you have to meet two conditions. Is your AI system a safety component of a product that falls under existing union harmonization legislation in Annex 1? Second is, based on that choice, does your product have to undergo a third-party conformity assessment under that union harmonization? So let me give you an example. Medical devices, which are dear to my heart. So if I have a product which is a medical device, and it is an AI system itself, I go to Annex 1 of the EU AI Act. I flip over there. I look at all the lists of legislation. I see that the medical device regulation is there. Okay, that's my first tick mark. The second thing is, does this medical device, does it require a conformity assessment? If it's a yes, then you are considered a high-risk medical device. Once you fill those two conditions, you are high risk. And this can apply to all the other union harmonization laws, which are listed in Annex 1. So that includes machinery, automotive, PPE. So that's the first way to determine if you're high risk. The second way, if you don't meet those conditions, you're not out of the loop right yet. You have to go to Annex 3 of the EU AI Act. There is a list of 7 different themes with 7 particular uses, intended uses. So you got to go one by one. Does my AI system fall under any of these categories? And I'll give you an example. There are particular systems under the theme of employment. Let's say an employer uses an AI system to monitor your behavior on its computers or anything else, and then makes a prediction if you should be promoted or let go. That is considered a high-risk system. That is not a prohibited system, but it's high risk. So go to Annex 3 and just go down the list. Does any of these themes and intended uses fit my AI system? To add more complication, there are exceptions. So if you have an AI system that may fall into one of these buckets, but it only performs narrow tasks, like really simple tasks, or tasks that add on to other human tasks, or are purely like very superficial or like very preparatory, you may get an exception to be not a high-risk system. However, in any type of system here, if you profile a person, you characterize them in some way, that will always be considered high risk. So as I said, high-risk systems are not simple to classify, so it'll take some time and thinking to decide, not to decide, but to make the determination that your system is high risk. Okay, so I'm going to go a little quick through these ones because they're quite simple. We have a third category called limited risk. So if you use an AI system to generate content, such as a video or something like a deep fake, these require certain transparency obligations. So if I'm sitting here and generating an AI video of a dog doing something, once I have that output, the system needs to disclose on that output, the video, that this was generated by an AI system. So Those are, that's what we call it as limited risk, and the obligation is to add that transparency disclosure. Okay, last is minimal to no risk, and it's kind of hard to think about AI systems not presenting any risk, but think about spam filters. Think about maybe some photo filters that you use that may use AI. So there are no obligations for these AI systems, but within the EU AI Act, the Commission encourages all AI economic operators to have a code of conduct. So if you're a minimal to no risk provider deployer, you should have a code of conduct at a minimum. I'm going to go quickly on this one. This is general purpose AI. General purpose AI is what you think as foundational models generative. The definition is quite lengthy, but I broke it up into 4 parts. If you tick out each of these parts, you're considered generated by AI. I will caution that the AI European, I think the official board, may change this just because of the evolving nature of the industry you're in. But at a minimum, if your system or model is trained with a large amount of data using self-supervision at scale, about 10 to raised to 25 degrees of flops, that's a technical spec. That is one of the conditions for being a general purpose AI. If the system or model can do a whole host of intended uses within a range of domains, it displays that type of generality. It's considered general purpose. It can do a wide range of tasks. And if it can be integrated as well into downstream applications or product, that would be considered generative AI. So I'm going to go over a few timeline dates. Based on what type of system risk level you have, there are specific dates you need to know. So remember, we're anticipating that the publication of the EU AI Act will be in June 2024, entry into force 20 days later. So after that entry into force, 6 months after, all prohibited systems need to be removed from the EU market. 12 months after, all the obligations for general purpose AI and AI governance needs to come into effect. So the notified bodies need to be set up, the competent authorities need to be set up, and the starting of the levying of fees if these certain providers or economic operators are not compliant will start to roll in. Okay, 24 months and 36 months. These are the 2 conditions for high-risk AI. If you remember, there are multiple ways of determining if your AI system is high risk. So if you're a high-risk system based on Annex 3, you have 24 months to come into compliance, 36 months for Annex 1. Okay. So unfortunately, like GDPR, it's not cheap to have non-compliance to the EU AI Act. Here are the fees, and I'll go from cheapest to not cheapest. So if you're an organization, or there is an organization that provides false, misleading, inaccurate data to, let's say, a notified body, a member state, or the public, you will level 7.5 million euro fee, or 1.5 of your company or organization's annual turnover. The second bucket here, 15 million euros or 3% of worldwide turnover, if you fail to meet the compliance obligations of your economic operator class and AI system. So if you're a high-risk system and you don't comply with half of the requirements and the member states become aware, you will be charged this fee. Now, last thing is if you have prohibited AI system placed on the market, hopefully not after those 6 months, you will be charged 35 million euros or 7% of your annual turnover. I will say for small, medium, micro-sized companies, it is the lesser of the 2 values, but we do not encourage you to levy such fees. So before I hand it to Andrea, maybe 2 minutes to just discuss in your tables, what classification of AI system do you think your organization has? Okay, I'll just hand it over to Andrea. So like 2 minutes, yeah.
Thank you. Great. Good. So, can you guys hear me? Cool, perfect. Thank you very much. I hope you had the time to discuss a little bit your specific case and maybe your classification. And if your system, your AI system, is falling into the high category risk class, we'll be going through some of the requirements for these AI systems under the EU AI Act. So first of all, we start on the top left with conformity assessments. This is not working, right? Is it? With, sorry, with conformity assessments. So as Sarah explained before, conformity assessments are a mean for notified bodies and regulatory entities to assess the compliance of an AI system with the applicable requirements of a legislation. So basically, applying to, in order to put your product on the EU market, you will need to undergo a conformity assessment against the requirements of the AI Act. Second of all, I will focus on cooperation with competent authorities. All AI system providers, distributors, and companies are meant to interact with competent authorities in Europe. They need to maintain their product in compliance with the applicable requirements. Be mindful that these requirements may evolve over time, of course. And also they need to keep an open channel of communication with these competent authorities in order to make sure that possible issues that may arise after market release are addressed and covered. Then we have a duty of information. Okay, duty of information. So duty of information is with regards to end users. So high-risk users, they will need to be informed that the system they're using is an AI system, which are the capabilities of the AI system, which are its capacities also, which are the potential risks and threats that are introduced by this AI system, and which is the intended use of the high-risk AI system. And then we have the last one that I'm going to talk about is the corrective actions. Corrective actions are something very important for high-risk devices. So once we release a product on the market, AI providers, they need to maintain a sort of surveillance on the post-market release phases, therefore on the performances and on the potential problems that may arise, and therefore implement any corrective actions with a proper plan in order to solve these potential issues. Of course, I've just summarized a few. We've just discussed a few of these requirements. We may go a little bit more in detail with a few slides, and we will see in particular why these requirements are so important. So with Article 9, we talk about risk management system. A risk management, it's something essential. Everybody driving a car or doing normal actions during our day life, we always evaluate the risk, but not only the risk on itself, also the probability that it's deriving from that risk may arise. So we all go out in the streets without worrying about the risk of an asteroid hitting us on the head, of course, because there's a probability which is very low that this is going to happen in our normal life. So we need to evaluate the risk not only by itself, but also considering its probability. We need to evaluate that, and we need to mitigate according to these two parameters, so risk and probability. This is very important, of course, to reduce end-user risk and their potential risk that may come from an AI system. Then we go into data and data governance. Labeling and processing and managing bias are fundamental. Just be mindful that bias, and it's not something that the EU AI Act wants to completely remove from data sets. This will be impossible, of course. But it's something that needs to be understood and managed. So by going in the example that Sarah was doing before on medical devices, if we take, for example, a mammography scan and an AI system that reads all these images and detects possible cancers, we need some bias inside because, of course, this is the intended purpose of this device is directed towards a specific purpose, which is mammography. So we need some bias inside, but we need to be aware of this bias and we need to manage it properly, okay? This is very important because we are all aware, I believe, of the principle of trash in and trash out in our algorithms. So if we train our algorithms, we can have the best one, the best algorithm, but if we train it poorly, it will not perform very well. The last article of this slide is Article 11, and it's about the technical documentation. Technical documentation is something that's pretty common for regulated industries, but I spend a few words to explain what's a technical documentation. Basically, it's an assembly of files, of documents that describe the intended purpose of the system. They describe the development process, the deployment process, which software was used during the design, which models were used during the creation of the AI system. So all these information are part of the technical documentation. And this is what notified bodies are going to analyze during the conformity assessment. Of course, the EU AI Act also introduces some other means for for notified bodies to assess compliance with the requirements, also some data set testing and algorithm auditing, but this constitutes the main part of a conformity assessment. So technical documentation and having a technical documentation in place is fundamental also to ensure quality of your entire process of management of your system. We then go into record keeping. Again, as we mentioned before, it's fundamental to keep track of the performances of your AI system. If it's a continuous learning AI system, you will need to know how it's evolving, which are possible risks that may arise from this evolution. And this is all about post-market monitoring, post-market release monitoring. This is very important also for traceability, because if we identify that there's an issue inside an algorithm, we need to be able to track where our algorithm is, where our AI system is, and therefore inform our end users that there is a potential problem and which are the corrective actions that we need to implement. Transparency and information to user, we treated that before. AI users, they need to be aware that this is an AI system and it's an high-risk system, which are also the intended purposes of our system. This has a lot to do with risk management also. If we all know what our devices are meant to be used for, but if I don't know what is the intended purpose of my device, I may end up using it incorrectly or in a wrong way, and therefore introducing new risks that AI providers have not predicted. So it's important that AI providers specify which is the intended purpose of their AI system, and also that provide some instruction for use on the AI system on how to interpret data, how to read information that we receive from the AI system. Human oversight, it's something that generally it's very debated, but human oversight, it's fundamental because the AI Act wants to keep humans at the center of AI deployments and of AI systems, and especially of the decision-making process. So AI systems may introduce suggestions, they may give indications, they may provide analysis and visualize data and so on, but final decisions on how to interpret those data, they will need to sit within a human being. The last two articles that I'm going to talk about are Article 15 and Article 17, and they're respectively around accuracy, robustness, and cybersecurity. It's, of course, fundamental that our AI system performs well, therefore has a certain level of accuracy. The AI Act doesn't put any barrier to your to the performances of AI system, but it's encouraging to, of course, evaluate these performances and understand which are the risks deriving from this data. Again, risk and risk management. On quality management system, when we talk about quality management system, again, this is pretty common in regulated industries in Europe. Having a system in place, a quality management system is a set of tools, procedures, governances that ensure compliance across time, that drive the evolution of the AI system, that drive the development of the system and the market release, of course. So it's always about planning and continuous improvement. One of the main things that we probably get told when we talk about the EU AI Act is that it's thought that the EU AI Act is going to stifle innovation and it's going to somehow slow down innovation. Honestly, this is not first of all, this is not the purpose of a legislation. So the entire legislation was not developed with this purpose. But on a side note, I will say that some of these requirements that we've seen today are actually fundamental for companies to understand which are the pitfalls of their AI systems, and therefore these companies are addressed to tackle these pitfalls and improve and bring improvements. So if you see it that way, it's not really stifling innovation, it's actually encouraging safe and trustworthy innovation. Now, how these requirements are then translated into technical requirements, into practical requirements. And in May 2023, the European Commission issued a standardization request. Standards, as Sarah explained before, are like recipes on how to best produce and create our products. And this standardization request goes around, lists 10 different categories of standards that are needed in the field of AI to support the legislation. So international organization and standardization bodies such as ISO, Sensenelec, and also BSI, we participated to the creation of ISO standards, of standards in general, and these standards will be used to basically take out all the requirements from a technical point of view for your AI systems. Now, standards are also very useful because they can be used by companies. First of all, to have a guidance on which are the implementation that need to be done during the development and deployment phases, but also because they can be used to to demonstrate compliance against a regulation. So during the conformity assessment, a standard can be used to demonstrate compliance, and this is what it's called presumption of conformity. So if you comply to a standard, and you can demonstrate that you also comply to the legislation. But to do that, the standard needs to be harmonized, okay? So we have a set of standards that will be harmonized to the legislation, and by adopting those standards, you can show presumption of conformity against the entire legislation, and therefore be allowed to put your product on the market. Adopting standard is also very important to demonstrate that you're aligned with the so-called state of the art, because as we mentioned before, standards are like the best way to do things, and so if you demonstrate that, you can demonstrate that you're aligned with the state of the art, which is also, I believe, a very strong marketing tool. Now, in terms of which are the relevant standards, here is a list, article by article, of the main standards that are relevant and that will be used, that will be harmonized to the legislation. So For example, we have standards against risk management, which is 23894. Another very important standard is 42001. So all those in bold in here in the slide, I encourage you to read more about these standards and have a deeper understanding of these. Good. I'll give you probably some time to take the final pictures of this slide because I can see that this is very useful sometime. And then we can proceed to the final part of our presentation. Yeah, sorry. Cool. Anyway, never mind, these slides will be available at the end of the presentation, so you can have full access to them, of course. Now, the final part of our presentation is about our services, so how BSI actually supports companies. We've seen the status of notified bodies, so you will actually need, if you fall under the high-risk class, of course, you will actually need to apply to notified bodies, and we plan to be the first notified body against this new legislation. But we also want to promote a proactive approach. So we've seen the timeline for applicability of all provisions for the EU AI Act, and we've seen that full applicability will happen in 2027. But we want to start early because we've seen that preparing to something is better than rushing through something and just rushing through the compliance. So our proactive approach is a way for us to walk together towards full compliance against the regulation. Therefore, we offer a portfolio of services which are available from training to assessments and to certification of AI management systems. I will go more in detail about each of these quite briefly to leave some time for questions. When we talk about trainings, I'd like to specify just one more thing, going back to this slide. All our services are built around those standards that we've seen before. So all our we decided to take this approach because we recognize that specifically for this legislation, standards are very relevant, and therefore our approach was against standards, and all our services are designed around the standards that we've seen before. So we developed a set of trainings that are available both as on-demand contents or instructor-led contents that go through all the requirements introduced by each of these standards. Our technical experts will be more than happy to provide also use cases during this training to show how these requirements can be implemented in your development process. On top of that, we also have AI management system certification. We've seen before ISO 42001, which regulates the management system for AI providers. And by applying to this service, you can demonstrate compliance against it. It's another requirement that we didn't mention before, but having a quality management system in place, it's fundamental. We've seen that in Article 17, if I'm not wrong. And therefore, being certified against 42001 will be a mandatory requirement for all AI providers for high risk, of course, AI systems. AI technical design assessment is something similar to the conformity assessment. It's just done against standard applicable requirements coming from standard. It's a sort of ante litteram conformity assessment that willing companies can use to demonstrate, to understand their current level of compliance with the applicable requirements, as I mentioned before. In order to undergo this service, there's a need of having a technical documentation in place. On top of that, as I mentioned before, the AI Act also foresees other ways to demonstrate compliance on top of the technical documentation, so it's not a substitution, but it's an additional thing. and it's an algorithm auditing and dataset testing. So notified bodies will be entitled to request datasets and algorithms from high-risk AI providers to perform some tests on the algorithm and the dataset used for training. We're offering these, again, ante litteram for those companies who are willing to assess their current level of compliance with these requirements. This was pretty much it. Our approach was, as I mentioned before, proactive and meant to reduce your risks when facing the new regulation. And again, I'd like to repeat that our purpose and the purpose of the legislation is not to stifle innovation, but rather to support it and encourage safe and responsible adoption of AI systems. We'll now have some time for question and answer. So if you have any sort of question, of course, raise your hand. We have some microphones that will go around the room, and we'll be more than happy to address these questions. Thank you.
No questions.
Hello. Hi, my name is Sandrine. I'm from Montreal. I'm working with Lockheed Martin, and we don't have anything right now. But I was wondering, we don't have any products that are AI right now. But I'm wondering, with your timeline, if we wanted to put something out, or another company wanted to put something out in the European market between 2024 and 2026, what happens then? What kind of regulations would they have to meet, or would they get like a reduced set, or just not be allowed to get into the market?
Yeah, I think I got most of your question. So, what's your question? What type of regulations or legislation applies to?
Like right now, this act is not applicable. It's not out yet. But June of this year, it's going to be out. But it's not going to be fully implemented until 2026. So what happens between 2024 and 2026?
Yeah, it definitely depends on what economic operator, what classification your system is, and one other thing which we didn't talk about, if your product is already on the market versus not. So it depends on like where you are in the product development, product shipping phase. But let's say Lockheed Martin, you make maybe you make some defense machinery, aerospace. You should already be complying with those legislation, I guess, requirements then. But if you are in 2025 and you want to ship, let's say, a Lockheed Martin product, which is most likely high risk or above, I don't know if it's prohibited, you will have to, in order to get on the market, you have to immediately comply. That's one of the stipulations within the Act. So giving that transition period to 2026 is really more for those who are like already on the market. They have to come into compliance. If you're a brand new product and you are entering the market after the entry into force state, you have to automatically comply. Yeah.
Good morning, I'm Meredith Thatcher, based in Ottawa. My question is the compliance process, how long does that take?
Compliance process.
Well, when you go through as a notified body going through from a conformity assessment, I guess it's really the conformity assessment. How long does that process take?
So it really depends on, of course, on the system and on the risk analysis behind the system, of course. But I can give you some examples. So, for example, we've already introduced our AI experts in the MDR assessments and the medical device assessment demanded by the medical device regulation in Europe to assess the AI components of medical devices under, of course, applicable requirements of the medical device regulation. And at the moment, a full conformity assessment on a technical documentation from our perspective on the AI parts, it takes from 2 to 4 days. But just bear in mind that these are numbers that are related to applicable requirements under another regulation. So having a full assessment will mostly depend on the risk analysis and on the level of risk introduced by, and on the complexity also of the device. Also, one other point that I'd like to highlight is that the quality of information that we receive as notified bodies is also fundamental. If we receive poor quality information before failing an application, we will come back and ask questions and or ask additional evidence, and therefore the process time will increase a lot. So it may take from, I don't know, a minimum of 4 days, I would say, up to 9 months or whatever, okay? There's also another thing that's important to specify related to ISO 14001, because this is the duration of a conformity assessment, but for what concerns ISO 14001, there's actually a table defining the duration of audits of the assessment that depends on the number of employees, on the number of sites that your company has, on the location of those sites, and especially on your role. So we've seen before whether you're a provider or a distributor or whatever we've seen before. Okay.
Hi there, my name is Azim. I work for Arctas. Essentially, it's a AI proposal solution for government contracts. My question is, if a application is a web application that's used for all general users, and there are some users that are from the EU countries, whatever, that use it. However, the servers that run these models are not in the EU. Are these regulations applied on there, or what are the things?
Yeah, so the servers that holds the data, so that would have to fall under GDPR. There are certain stipulations for where the data can be. If you're a general like a general web application, you may consider reviewing the definition for general purpose AI, because from what you're saying, you sound like a general purpose AI model, and you'll have, let's say your organization or company will have to comply with those requirements. That's what I am assuming based on what I heard from you. Yeah. Oh.
Hello? Okay.
Yep.
I'm Sheblan. I'm a research scientist at Stability AI. So I'm curious, how does the Act treat synthetic data? Like, under the most dangerous class, like the most unacceptable class, I saw one of the things was you shouldn't train on scraped data. But I'm curious, let's say a model exists that was already trained on scraped data. What is the legality around someone training another model on the outputs of that model?
Yeah, and there are many ways to answer that question. It, again, depends on the intended use and domain you're working in. So a few things. Article, I believe it's like 11 about data and data governance. You need to make sure synthetic or non-synthetic data needs to comply with those requirements. But you need to consider, if you're working in a field like medical devices, we will probably not really accept things like synthetic data, because clinical studies, we all want to have products that are based on real human studies, outputs, outcomes, but you may have other industries which may be more permissible to use synthetic data. It depends on what domain you're operating in. But again, I think it was Article 10, data and data governance. Yep, that's about it.
Yeah, cool. So it's always important also, as you mentioned before, to assess the risk introduced by every decision that you make during the development process. So labeling, processing, and the bias of data must be described in the technical documentation to demonstrate that this data, even if they're synthetic data, they're still good enough to train your model or to be used in whichever step of your development process that you wish. So every decision that you make, there's no right or wrong decision. I'd just like to highlight this. There's no right or wrong decision. And the EU AI Act will never tell you which is right or wrong. We'll always tell you to demonstrate that this meets the requirements, okay? But there's no right or wrong answer to any question. One more question? Cool.
Thank you. So my name is François Lamy. I'm working for a software company. We develop software for engineering, manufacturing, service, etc. And our software can be embedded on many different type of machines. So potentially some of our software are going to be in the high risk category. And my question will be more, do we need to deal with individual countries in Europe, or it's just we go
All
through
one size fits all. However, it won't be expected. Let's say member states will come out with their own follow-up
So
laws,
yeah.
but from what you're saying, and what you described, it's going to be a one size fits all.
Okay.
But I'd like to specify one thing on this one. Notified bodies are encouraged to offer conformity assessment under multiple regulations. So, for example, we are a notified body under different regulations. But if we take, for example, the medical device one, within medical devices and AI, there won't be two notified bodies. There will be two notified bodies, yes, so always BSI, but doing a joint conformity assessment. So we are encouraged as notified bodies to streamline the process for conformity assessment for you guys. Of course, it's up to you if you want to apply to one notified body for your medical device regulation and one other notified body for your AI compliance. It will just prolongate the process and make the process way more expensive also and heavy. So we are encouraged to streamline this. Good. I think we are done
Yeah,
for
we'll let
today.
you guys go get lunch for those of you who haven't gotten
Yes.
lunch. And yeah,
Thank
if you have
you
any
very much.
questions, you can come talk to us. Or Andy, our commercial BSI expert, is also in the back. If you can wave your hand, Andy. Okay, awesome. If you have any questions, feel free to come to us, connect with us on the app, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you very much.
Bye.